Hi, I'm Sami, and this is the Career Kickstart Show. I am excited because today I have Caroline Adams, who is here to just share a little bit about how you can make networking, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can make networking 100% less repellent than you feel about it right now. She's going to give us a lot of cool advice on how millennial women can become change makers, leaders, and how they can incorporate take back their lives and design a career with purpose. And one of the ways it's a great tactic to work on your career, to work on, just your life, is connecting with others who are like-minded. So we're going to get a little bit more in depth on networking and what it can be for you, me, and all those people holding canapes at a Chamber of Commerce mixer trying to figure out what the heck they're doing with this networking event. So, Caroline, I know that I've barely even scratched the surface of what you do and your strategies and your tactics and how you work with clients, but could you give us just an overview of yourself, whether that's an elevator pitch or just telling us more about your story?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the intro, Sami. I think you did a great job.
Thanks.
So I am Caroline Adams. I'm a coach, writer, and business owner. And as Sami said, I help women take back their lives and design careers with purpose. So just a little bit of backstory to that. I had a long career in corporate. Some of it was good. A lot of it crushed my soul. And my career was really controlling my life in a lot of ways. And through my own experience, but also as I watched other women, I just got really sick of seeing these creative, capable women just get stuck, being underutilized, getting bored, getting unfulfilled. So the first step was to completely redesign my own life and career. And now I work with women to do the same for them. So my clients are multi-passionate. They tend to be creative. They also want to make money. Imagine that. And they want to do a lot of things in their life. So I work with them to combine all of these things to create a great life. And so for me, it's, not just about finding a job, right? It's really about taking back control of their entire story and designing a great life, of which career is an important piece, right? I want you to have a great career, but it's one piece of the bigger picture.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Well, that's the thing. We're spending 40 hours a week in our jobs at minimum. Some people are putting in some crazy hours there. And well, it would be nice if it was something that actually kind of jazzed us up a little bit. You talked a little bit about story, and that intrigues me because storytelling is becoming such a big deal right now. I work with a lot of people who are in tech and everything, and with the competitive job markets that they have in Silicon Valley, it's a lot about branding and storytelling and setting yourself apart. I know that we're going to get into the networking later, but I feel like it's really important for people before they start doing networking and everything like that to kind of have their story straight. Because I feel like a lot of people fumble at the conference or at the snack table or whatever because someone asks them who they are, what they do, and they just kind of flop around a little bit. So before we get to networking, could you tell me a little bit about storytelling and how that's becoming more important for job hunters?
Yeah, I love your analogy of fumbling at the drink table. I can visualize myself doing that very thing. There's so many advantages to storytelling. First of all, it's fun. And I think especially when we're talking about networking or anything having to do with your career, why not have it be fun? Like, I don't understand why we feel the need to make things boring and tough on ourselves, harder than they need to be. So stories are great. They liven things up, right? They help you set apart. And what I love about storytelling is you can pull out the pieces that are most important to you. It's a great way to showcase, if there's three things that you want someone to walk away from your conversation knowing about you, storytelling is a great way to do that. And it doesn't have to feel like an elevator pitch. I think a lot of times we are trained. I can't even list for you the amount of times I've gone through training where I work on my elevator pitch for something. And I think having a short, concise way to talk about what you do is great. But I think oftentimes the formula that we're given is this kind of like stodgy 3-sentence, here's what I do, here are my skills, here are my interests. And when you can turn it into a story about why you're interested in the things that you're doing or how you got engaged with something, it's just a much more compelling and, like I said, energizing way for you to tell it. And I think that reads, right? When you're excited or passionate about something, or you're really enjoying what you're talking about, I think that translates to the other person. And that's why people hire, right? They hire someone that they like who's going to solve their problem. So it just does a lot in that one little compact storytelling vessel. It does a whole lot for you in getting your points across.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially, being able to go over your story. I feel like that also helps bring some clarity to a lot of people, because most of us are not as intentional with our careers. We might have had, a meeting with a guidance counselor and everything when we were like 17. They're pretty much time to decide your entire life. And you're like, I guess I like to draw stuff. Maybe I can be an artist? Question mark, question mark. And I feel like once you get to college and then you graduate, you get so caught up in that rat race and just trying to get ahead that you kind of don't connect back with that why. And I feel like that why is sort of the kernel with a lot of stories. That's the thing that makes people interested. That's something that employers want to hear. They don't want it to be like, oh, I'll just work for anybody. They want to feel a little bit flattered, and be like, oh, you want to work with me specifically because of X, Y, and Z? Oh, yes. So do you find that when you work with people, like I work with a variety of genders, but I do notice that women often have trouble articulating their story and what they want to do. Do you have any ideas on how people can kind of tease out a little bit those parts of their story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first thing, and maybe this is a little bit not what you're expecting, but I think what people often do is, especially women, they write themselves out of the story, right? So when they talk about their accomplishments, or there's an opportunity to talk about their accomplishments or their skills, they'll talk about their team, right? We celebrate our team's success. And so we point the finger to management or our teams and kind of showcase them, which is good. I'm not telling people to completely throw that away, but write yourself back into the story, right? So you can talk about your team. My team was able to take this great idea across the finish line. My boss gave us the budget that we needed. And that allowed me to play the role of field commander or whatever, So I think that's the first thing, is make sure that you're including yourself in the story. And I think the other thing that does, and the thing that storytelling does, is, again, a lot of people, I think, sometimes shy away from storytelling or talking about themselves because it feels like bragging. So when you tell a story, right, and you're just talking about how we got from point A to point B and what your role was in that, I think it takes some of the pressure or ickiness, that's an official coach term there, takes the ickiness out of putting yourself first and really talking about the value that you create. So I think that's number one. I think the second one, if you kind of don't know where to start with your story, what I advise people to do is to go to the people around them, the people they've worked with, the people they admire, the people in their family. What do people say about you? And so if you don't feel comfortable saying, I'm a great field commander or I'm a skilled communicator, you can say, what people often comment on about me is XYZ. I'm really good at communicating, or I'm really good at hearing what people aren't saying. And so that's another way to start bringing in, well, what are the things that people most pick up about me? And I would also say, make sure that that's something that you want to showcase yourself, because sometimes they might give you a compliment that you don't want to be known for, right? Maybe I'm a great project manager, but I'm really trying to shift into another space. But you can start with those nuggets that other people always recognize and appreciate about you. So I'd say those two things. I actually have a blog post we can put in the show notes that goes into more examples. But I think those two things, make sure you're talking about yourself and listen to what others are picking up on. And as long as that aligns with the story you want to tell, that can be an easier way into showcasing your skills and abilities.
Okay, I love that, because I've also known that maybe it's just because how we all grow up with fiction and everything. Like, let's just take like Star Wars. There's always that hero in the story, but oftentimes women kind of cast themselves in the supporting role. Yep. They're, the damsel, the mom, whatever. And it's kind of like you have to stand up and be like, no, I'm the Luke Skywalker in this story.
Yes.
And really kind of claim that space. Now, let's kind of shift gears. Okay, let's say that your person has already kind of worked on your story. You've already cast yourself as the hero in your career journey, et cetera, et cetera. How is that something where when you're going to networking events, is there anything that you can do to prepare yourself a little bit before the event or something like that? Maybe write something down. Like, what are some little practical steps for someone to kind of internalize that sort of thing? So when they are asked, what do you do? Or tell me more about yourself, they don't pull out a note card. They're like, as per my note card, I have done.
Yes. And I think you hit right on the heart of this, right? Which is a lot of people approach or think about networking as being this like insincere, transactional, or awkward thing. Right. And so telling stories isn't you having a planned script that, as soon as you meet someone, you launch into this script. Right. These should be conversations, and we should be, I hate to say the word should, but I would love us to endeavor to connect with people and start a conversation. So I think that's the first thing to think about is, how am I going to connect with this person? And oftentimes it's not launching into our own story, but it's being excited to know more about them. So, connecting with them, hearing their story, and at every step seeing where you might fit into that or share one of your own stories. And if you're interested in knowing more, because again, one other thing to know about networking situations is you might not connect with everyone, and that's okay. That's part of the value of networking, is seeking out those people that are really the best fit for you, because those are going to lead to the opportunities that feel the best. If you have an awkward, uncomfortable, insincere conversation with someone at a networking event or even in a one-on-one conversation, well, how is it going to feel to show up at your job every day and interact with that person? So they can be a good screen in that way too. And then as far as what you should say, I wouldn't prepare a script. I wouldn't worry about note cards. I would think about a story that really is important in showing someone who you are, right? And it can be about a particular skill. It can be about, kind of what you're looking for. It can be really anything. But I think it starts with the idea of, what do I want people to know about me? What do I want them to walk away from this conversation knowing about me?
I like that you point out the fact that it's a two-way street when it comes to networking. It's not like you're auditioning, that it's something where you're also making some critical thinking on who you actually want to associate with. Because I try to think about networking, and this might make me sound very grade school, but I like to think about networking as just, I am meeting new people for the possibility of friendship. I'm not here to strictly make a collaborator or to make a deal. I'm not here wheeling and dealing. I'm here trying to meet some people who are like-minded, who are interesting, who share my passion. Because that's the thing that we lose a lot of times with career building, is the fact that we usually come to our professions with some level of passion, whether it's for the impact we're making, the skills we're using, something else. And so often we don't have people in our personal lives who feel that same level of passion for that particular industry or topic. So try to think of it as now I can make a friend who actually cares about Excel tables or community building or nonprofit fundraising or something like that.
Yeah, I think you hit on two really important pieces. One is that at every step in this process, you're learning about what's important to you, right? And so maybe you're discovering some things about yourself as you look at what really engages you with certain people and what you like about them, and maybe in some cases, what turns you off about them. And they're showing you who they are, right? That's the thing that I think people find so surprising. Like, if you have an interaction with someone and it's really, really great, or conversely have an interaction and it's really, really not great, they're showing you how they're going to be every day when you end up in your job. So listen to those tidbits of information and listen to that body language in some cases that they're sharing with you. And I think the other thing is, you put out with friendship, right? I think a lot of times we think of these networking events and meeting people in general as transactional, right? So what can I get from them, or what can I give to them, or what's the purpose of this immediate conversation? And I think it misses the point of, when you're building longer term relationships, they are going to serve you not only to get into the next role, but to help you succeed in that role and get to the next role beyond that. And so I think your analogy of friendship is a great one. Is this someone I want in my life? When you go to a party and you meet someone and you just really vibe with them, or you see an old friend and you just always feel so much better after talking to them, right? That that's the sort of energy we want. Conversely, like when you meet someone and you just always walk away from the conversation like feeling bad about yourself or lacking in some way, we don't want that. And so paying attention to who they are and seeing, is this the sort of energy and vibe that I want to be around, goes a long way. And in a lot of ways, it's much more important than the actual nuts and bolts of what you're doing in the job to actually like these people.
What kind of came to mind when you were talking about this? And this is also, for the people who are listening at home, this is also a bit of Caroline's specialty, is that you specialize in a lot of leadership for millennial women and everything like that. I feel like when you're making those active networking decisions on who you're collaborating with, who you're talking to, stuff like that, that's almost like a self-leadership. Even if you're not the leader in your team or in your industry, when you are taking on that sort of self-leadership, that self-determination, when you are networking and you're doing stuff, I feel like that can be a transformative shift for some people. Because I don't think we all take ourselves as we are all leaders until we actually get an official title. But how do you feel about when people are doing these networking, they're trying to get into leadership, they're trying to act like leaders? What's a good way for them to go to these networking events and kind of showcase that leadership, whether it's self-leadership or industry leadership? Tell me what you think.
Yeah, I love that you wove that in there. So I think as a starting point, be the person you want to be. Right. And I love the point that you made about people do associate leadership with position in a company or organizational hierarchy. And I think we've all probably worked with a boss that was in a position that we had no idea why they were in that position because they weren't a leader. And we work with people who maybe didn't have a lot of official authority, but was the person in the room that always had a lot of sway, or you always wanted to hear what they said. So the first step in self-leadership is recognizing that you are what you bring to the table, and you can lead in every single situation, even when it's networking or something uncomfortable, something you don't particularly want to do. So how do you want to be in that situation? Do you want to position yourself as, someone who is a great listener? Do you want to position yourself as the funny person? Do you want to position yourself as, the list goes on and on. But I think really thinking about, all right, once I get into this role, who do I want to be in that? And then acting like that in every, not just networking, but every single interaction. It goes a long way, because I think sometimes people give away that power unwittingly because they assume that they need to be in place or have that official authority to actually lead with that authority. And so to recognize first that, no, you have total control to be a leader in every single interaction, whether you're at the grocery store or a networking event or dealing with your neighbor. And so really channeling that, figuring out first, as you said before, getting clarity on what that is and what that means to you, and then channeling that in every single interaction.
So we're going into leadership now. What tactics or ideas or just advice do you give to women who do want to take on those leadership roles? Because when we're talking about millennials, we're all getting to the age range where we're no longer the junior associates. We're no longer the new fish. How can women stand in that power, in their own power and their own leadership, trusting their intuition to become leaders? What advice do you give to them?
Yeah, well, gosh, I think we could have a whole program on that. But as a first step, and I think this applies to networking and a whole host of other things, and that is this: you don't have to have all the answers, right? And so I think a lot of times with leaders, people who are told that they're leaders, people who are high potentials and high achievers, people who are pretty good at working through things, I think over time can sometimes develop this idea that they have to be the person that solves something. And they've probably built a reputation around that. A lot of my clients are very high performers, high achievers, high potentials. And so they have just really made a name for having all these answers. And so especially as you get into those higher roles of leadership, you'll actually find the less you talk, the more you listen, the better. And so just to bring it around to networking in particular, one of the ways I think women and other people give away their power and don't act as leaders when it comes to networking is they'll shy away from talking to people, either because they feel like they're going to waste other people's time, and or they feel like they need to figure it out before they talk to people. Right. And so it kind of creates this, vicious cycle of, well, how can you figure stuff out in your own head if you're not out there talking to people in the world? But that kind of need to figure things out on their own really holds them back. So I think a great orientation, again, in life and in networking, is to leverage other people to come up with solutions. right? And I cannot tell you how many times this happens in people's careers where networking and talking to other people is a thing that they rail the most against. And then when they actually go out and do it, they'll meet someone that totally, takes them under their wing and creates a bespoke position for them, or makes a connection for them, or thinks of an organization or a way to apply their skills and interests in a way they never could have thought of on their own. And so I think that openness to leveraging people, acknowledging what you don't know, and then letting people help you, because I think that's another component, especially as we're capable and we move further and further up the ladder and get better at our careers. We don't like asking for help, or we forget to flex that muscle. Maybe we're okay with it, but we're just so used to being great, capable doers that we forget that we can ask other people and be vulnerable.
And I think there's like an element of perfectionism. A lot of people, they're afraid to maybe get a little bit messy, maybe make a mistake, maybe make a misstep, what have you. So they have to almost break down that perfection aspect in being able to delegate and, get past those ideas that we have in our Western society of being this individual loner man who is an island, can do it all, self-made person. And we hold ourselves to those standards as if it was something that, Carnegie didn't have any help, or Mark Zuckerberg. All those people had folks helping them along the way or working with them. So just getting back to this element of perfectionism, what do you think is a good way for people to kind of brush off the perfectionism so they can get into network and they can get into leadership? They can just hold their head up, and even if they make a mistake or a slip up, or they forget their business cards or whatever they're beating themselves up for after the mixer, how can they just bypass that process?
Yeah, so there's a lot of techniques. I think just a few off the top of my head. The thing about perfectionism is it's an action killer, right? It keeps you totally in your head and it keeps you from action, right? Because you convince yourself that you can't take a step until you get it right. So it's basically, you make it as impossible as it is in your head. So obviously taking steps, right? Just doing the thing and making those mistakes and learning from those mistakes along the way. Because some of the most beautiful things, I actually have a post, right? How was penicillin discovered? Complete accident, right? It's actually how we stumble onto those great things. I think the other thing with perfectionism, and it's interesting with millennials in particular, because it's actually been found that millennials are more prone to perfectionism than previous generations, and is actually linked to serious health consequences. So it's a real thing for people. People over-personalize things. And so when they make a mistake, right, and I shouldn't even say mistake, when they do something and it turns out not like the pretty picture that they had in their head, not only did it not turn out as they wanted to, but they make it mean something about them, right? And so I think staying away from personalizing or over personalizing things, like it's just about the thing. You forgot your business card. It doesn't mean anything about who you are as a person or a leader or how you'll be in that role. You just forgot your business cards. So I think those are a couple of things. And then maybe we can also include a link to this blog post, but I think a really beautiful idea. I'm really into design. So I love this idea of wabi-sabi. So wabi-sabi briefly is this Japanese philosophy which actually values imperfection and impermanence and incompleteness. So all of the things that we think about perhaps as like broken or wrong or ugly or whatever are actually valued in this philosophy. And so I think to start to recognize and shift our perspective on, let's say it, mistakes as not actually mistakes, but things that you can actually learn from and grow from and be quirky. And as a quirky person, I really appreciate this. To start to really embrace them just totally changes the game.
And I feel like you have a good point about this quirkiness and embracing your own personality, your own traits, because people have this idea, oh, if I was perfect, if I said this right, or I lost 5 pounds or blah, 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 everybody would like me, yada, yada, yada. But like, and I know I'm going to sound like a big nerd, but think about it. Who's more popular, Batman or Superman? Batman. Even though Batman is flawed and Superman's perfect, people still like that flawed aspect because it's something where people can resonate with flaws. People can see a flaw as maybe that's a weakness, but there's usually a strength that compensates for it. And it's all about being able to leverage those strengths and those weaknesses and to see it as a happy accident, as Bob Ross always said.
And perfect is boring. I mean, I think as you illustrated, right? When you think about other TV shows and stuff, you've started to see a rise of these very flawed heroes, right? These heroes that aren't perfect. And back to the idea of storytelling. What are your favorite stories? They're not the ones where everything is perfect and nothing happens, right? They're super funny, or they're unexpected, or there's a big tragedy that we have to overcome. And so I think it's more interesting. Perfect is boring.
Agreed. And now we've been through a lot of different topics. We've been through time and space. We've talked about our favorite superheroes. You've learned that I'm a giant nerd. So let's actually go, I guess, in storytelling terms, let's go to an old cliche and get your ideas about it. I know that when we talk about networking, there is this divide between the introverts and the extroverts. What do you think about this? Because I feel like I've been told as an introvert that I have like a handicap with networking, but I feel like I'm one of the better networkers that I know, even if I may leave a party and then go become a hermit in my hoodie, catching up on, like a sitcom and everything like that. But do you feel like there is this big divide with introverts and extroverts? Let's get your thoughts.
Oh, this is a great question. I think networking is pretty universally reviled, whether people are introverts or extroverts. I do think as an introvert myself, right, there is no way that I'm going to get energized about going into a big group of people and having surface level conversations. And I can't actually speak to what about that an extrovert would particularly like. I guess the extroverts that listen to you will have to fill in the blanks. But I think the key is do what works for you. Right. And so for me as an introvert, it is about connecting with people. I love people, right? I just don't love 5 of them at once. Right. And I love going deep on topics. Like I love having conversations. So I'm not going to have a small talk conversation with you. I'm not going to try to walk into a big, scary conference room. And so I'm going to set up environments that make me feel good with people who I'm excited to talk to. And so I think whether you're an introvert or extrovert, how you might do that is different, right? There might be things about the environment or the way you go about doing that vary based on where you get your energy. But I think what joins the two is that it should energize you, right? It should feel good. There should be something that you are getting out of talking to the people that you're talking to, and something that you're giving to them, right? It's two-way, regardless of whether it's 5-on-1 or 1-on-1 or 20-on-1. So I think that's it. It's like finding the way in that feels not only not bad, right? Because no one wants to go in and hate these networking conversations, but actually find a way to what are the things that would actually make this kind of an interesting, exciting conversation to have?
Mm-hmm. I love that. One thing that I would add is that, because I love how you're talking about, choose your own adventure, choose what's going to be a good setup for you. And I also think, because I don't like small talk, so I'm the person who will try to function as a normal adult professional. And then about 30 minutes in, I'm just like, never mind, I'm just a weirdo. How about I just start asking people fun questions, so I'll ask them like alternative icebreakers as opposed to, what do you do? I ask stuff like, what has been a big passion project that you've been working on now? What's been the most interesting thing that you've seen in the industry? Blah, blah, blah. And try to get them kind of their brain thinking on something that they like. Because once you can get somebody talking about something that they're interested in, then it's like their whole face changes, their whole vibe changes. And suddenly they're like, oh, yeah, I could talk about something cool as opposed to remembering my elevator pitch.
Yes. And I think people appreciate that too. I think people are kind of done with the rote, what do you do for a living? So I think what you've done so artfully there is you're connecting with people and you're trying to zero in on the thing that lights them up, which may have to do with work or may have to do with something completely outside of work. But you're building that connection on which you can later apply other lenses or layers to. So I think that's brilliant. And I think it's a great technique for a lot of people too. It's like, okay, so if one of the things that makes you feel more comfortable is taking the spotlight off yourself for a little bit and really digging into, well, what makes this person tick? And, what am I curious about knowing about their story? I think that's can be a great way to start, right? Is like, you don't have to walk in and be like, I'm here. You can maybe some people do that actually, but I will never do that. I will be like the quietest person in the room. But when I'm in one-on-one, as on this podcast, like, you cannot shut me up, right? So I think it's really about looking at the person that you're talking to and figuring out a way to engage them. The other thing I want to say about that, though, is, and I do see this sometimes with introverts, and I think I struggle with this myself, like sometimes our nature of not wanting to have the spotlight on ourselves or being uncomfortable in these networking situations, we focus so much on the other person that we don't talk at all about ourselves. And so I think the important thing to remember, and you can do this really, really briefly, and you can do it really, really succinctly, you can tell one story, but tell people what you want, right? Make sure you don't leave that conversation without them knowing the most important thing about you. Even if you don't know exactly yet what that looks like, right? Tell them about the pieces of, well, I am looking to make a career change. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet. I'm in the early stages, but here are the things that I'm absolutely passionate about, or here's the type of organization I would love to work for, right? You can do it really, really quickly, but I would say don't sacrifice, whether you're introverted or just not comfortable kind of sharing about yourself. Make sure you don't leave that conversation without telling people what you want, because that's where the magic happens, right? Mm-hmm. Is like you talk to these people and you put it out there, and before you know it, stuff starts flowing your way.
Fantastic final point. So thank you, Caroline. It feels like we have been going through this whole interview, dropping a lot of good value bombs and, some juicy insight. So for those who are listening at home and they're like, you know what, I like the cut of that lady's coat. How do I find out more about her? Tell us, how can we find out more about you, Caroline?
Well, you can visit my website. It's carolineadamscoaching.com. So check me out there. You can learn more about what I do and how I work with people. I have a blog I post regularly, so you can actually subscribe to that blog and pop in and say hi. I love when people comment on the blog. I love when people ask questions, tell me what they're struggling with, share their comments about what I write about. So I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Caroline. It has been a great episode. I hope you've enjoyed being on the show. We've certainly enjoyed having you. I'm not sure why I did the royal we. It's just me. It's just me and a mini poodle in here. Well, I guess me and my mini poodle have enjoyed having you on the show.
And I've loved being here. So thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did. For sure. And thank you again. And thank you all for listening. As always, I'm Sami Gardner, and this is the Career Kickstart Show. Bye.
Change your career, change your life at CareerKickstartAcademy.com.